All right. So it's my pleasure to introduce Chuck Oxford. He's going to introduce our spotlight speaker for November, the Brainy Business founder, Melina Palmer. So Chuck Oxford, Charles E. Oxford, comes by it honestly. He is the CEO. He's a business consultant who helps business owners tap into their genius. He's an exceptional connection sponsor and a powerful contributor to our team. So take it away, Chuck.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's exciting that we have Melina here today. I'm so happy that she took the time to make a contribution to our community, because she's brilliant, and who else does behavioral economics? I mean, she's taught me a lot over these years that she started doing that, and I've learned so much. It's amazing. So I'm honored that she's our speaker today, and she's the founder and CEO of the Brainy Business, which provides behavior economic consulting to businesses of all sizes from around the world. Her podcast, The Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy, has downloads in over 170 countries and is used as a resource for teaching applied behavior economics in many universities and businesses. Melina obtained her bachelor's degree in business administration marketing and worked in corporate marketing and brand strategy for over a decade before earning her master's in behavior economics. A proud member of the Global Association of Applied Behavioral Scientists, Melina has contributed research to the Association for Consumer Research, Filene Research Institute, and runs the Behavior Economics and Business column for Inc. magazine. She teaches applied behavior economics through the Texas A&M Human Behavior Lab, and she has written and published her first book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You, published in May 21. And as we've just seen, she is a mom as well. My goodness. So in Melina's 20-minute talk, she will share what your customer wants and can't tell you. So Melina, please take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm hopeful that, so if I share this way, are we able to see just like me on the screen and everything? Sweet. All right. So yeah, thank you for the great introduction. I am Melina Palmer and excited to be talking to you about behavioral economics today, which I know sounds boring, but I promise it is not. I like to say that if traditional economics and psychology had this adorable baby, I need to dress up Hudson now so that he can be the baby, but we need to find him a wig or something. We would have behavioral economics. And so I know some of you are familiar with me already, but just as a quick refresher, essentially the reason the field came about is because there was a problem in traditional economics in that it assumes logical people making rational choices in everything that they do. And we're all humans, so we know that's not the world that we live in. So what you ended up with were a lot of models that didn't accurately predict behavior. It instead would say what people should do instead of what they actually do. And if you've ever found yourself or heard someone saying something like, man, our business would be so easy if it wasn't for the customers, which is something we hear a lot, know that you actually can better predict what they're going to do and understand what's happening in the brain and make it so you're communicating with that instead of trying to force things that feel good, to you using behavioral economics. So why does this matter to you? One is the biggies are all on board. These companies and many, many more all either have internal departments that are doing behavioral economics and behavioral sciences, or they're working with consultancies to be incorporating behavioral science into everything that they are doing. And for me, small businesses, specifically like all of you that are here, are just really important. I feel like they'll get left behind if they don't understand what's happening with behavioral economics. And so to be able to stay competitive, you need to understand these rules of the brain. That's why I wrote my book and have my podcast and all that to help teach that information. As even a really simple example of applying behavioral economics, this is a Netflix example, and they found, this is something that seems so commonplace now, but they learned that being able to change the image that was related to a specific show could increase the likelihood that someone would click to watch and then stay within Netflix by as much as 30%. These all look fairly similar. We have the same cast members, the same font and whatnot, but picking the right one made a huge, huge difference. And doing some simple A/B tests helped them to figure that out. So that's another good thing. Testing and starting to use behavioral economics doesn't have to be like moving mountains and the most difficult thing you've ever done. Quick bit about the brain, because it doesn't work the way we'd like to think that it does. Your brain, you can think of like an elephant, a person riding an elephant. We like to think that as the logical, conscious rider, we know where we're going, we have a plan, we're going to get there, nothing's going to stand in our way. But if you haven't properly motivated that subconscious elephant, it can be very difficult to get where you want to go. And because the two don't speak the same language, you can't logic the elephant into going where you want it to be. You can't push or pull it. If it gets distracted or just wants to sit down, you're kind of stuck at the mercy of that elephant. So communicating with it, knowing how to motivate the elephant is very, very key in getting people to take proper action that you want within your business. So our brains, we know we have this conscious cognitive space. We like to think this is doing everything, but that's not actually true. I like to incorporate some fun little chat box moments here. So we've got one coming up. So if you were to think about the subconscious, what percentage of the brain's processing do you think is subconscious? Would you say 25, 50, 75%? And like I said, I know some of you already listen to the podcast and whatnot, so we might have some answers closer than what we always get or have heard me speak before. So Tamara guessed 75. We have another 75 from Heidi. Stacy says 50. The highest that I've seen for a claim on this puts it as high as 99.999%. Which would mean for all the lazy brains that didn't want to do that math, that would be only 0.001 being done on a conscious level. Lowest studies put it at 95 or 90%. Even if it is only 80 or 75%, that's still a huge amount of what someone is doing in every single day. And understanding those rules to be able to properly communicate with the brain is what I help people to do with understanding behavioral economics. So it works essentially like if you think about a gatekeeper and a receptionist. So if you're trying to get a meeting with a busy executive, you have to get through the receptionist first. And there's a lot of rules that it has to say, like, these types of people never make it through. This can't do that. So your subconscious is saying, I have a rule for that. I know how to do this. Normal, 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 normal. And then every so often there'll be a flag where it'll let the conscious brain like step up and do something. And if we like to think about the ratio in a different way, sometimes people talk about the brain as if it were a computer. And so if you wanted to think about that subconscious elephant can do about 11 million bits of information per second that it can process. There's a lot going on, lots of those rules running through all the time. Compare that to our conscious brain, which can do about 40 compared to 11 million. Even if we were talking about 40,000, it's not a great ratio. And we don't just get to say, oh, this project is really important. I need 100 bits right now in my conscious brain, right? Doesn't work that way. And I know we were talking a little bit early in the kind of informal networking about how you can be telling a story that's going to resonate with people, how you're going to differentiate yourself, and being able to communicate again, with those rules that are going to help be more persuasive, understanding what the elephant is doing from those 11 million bits and relating to someone on that level can make it just much more likely that they are going to want to continue a conversation with you. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of concepts that I could have talked about today. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you listen to all of these. Many of them do have episodes of the podcast if you had wanted to check any out, or you can always ask me a question after the fact. But I did pick a couple that I want to talk about that are particularly relevant. And one quick concept that I introduced within my book is this one of behavioral baking. And so if you were to think, you decided, effective now, you want to start a bakery. Maybe you watched a lot of Great British Baking Show in the pandemic like I did, and you've decided like, this is my new thing I'm going to go do. Only problem is you've never baked anything in your whole life. So what would you want to do first? You probably need to understand the ingredients and a little bit about what they do. Flour, sugar, butter, and eggs can all combine to make a whole bunch of different things. And you want to know what you're going to make. You could be making cupcakes or cookies or macarons or pizza dough or whatever with those same things. If you don't know what the ingredients do, you might end up with 3 cups of sugar and a tablespoon of flour. And that would be a really weird, melty mix, maybe caramel or something. But if you don't know what you're going to make going in, also, you can't just throw all your ingredients in a bowl and like hope it's going to turn out delicious. You would need to have some sort of a plan and know you're trying to make brownies or whatnot. And even as you go too, if you were just getting started, you'd follow some sort of a recipe and maybe even start with like a box cake mix that's going to let you feel really safe as you get started. Along the way, you're going to be doing a lot of learning. It's not like it's going to be perfect right off the bat, but if that first cake is a little bit dense or soupy, you've learned something that you can then apply the next time you bake a cake. And as you get better and better, you're able to maybe include some other ingredients, spices or chopped fruit or whatever that you want to put into the cake, and eventually baking from scratch and being able to have this different experience. What I want to point out is you would never say, I tried baking once and it didn't turn out right. Baking's not real. That's not a thing. It's not real, right? You would never say that. But when we try stuff in our businesses, like you go and try marketing once or, some tactic, or you did one video on Instagram stories and didn't have instant fame, we'll say like, I tried Instagram stories. It doesn't work. We wouldn't say that. And it's the same for behavioral economics. So the way my book is laid out is I give you the ingredients, 16 concepts that are important for businesses, how to understand what they are. Part 3 is looking at ways you can be combining them in sort of a recipe that's looking at this kind of flow through the book. We obviously can't talk about all of these today, but there are some we're going to definitely get to, like what problem you're solving and showcasing your best choice, things like that, as we go. But again, this is the flow of what your customer wants and can't tell you. The most important thing to know, the biggest mistake businesses make, from people I've worked with, from people I interviewed for the podcast, for the book, around the world, all types of businesses, from solopreneurs to global corporations, is not spending enough time thinking about the problem, not making sure that you're working on the right thing. Because our brains are really programmed to think that we're smarter, best, better, faster than everyone else, including us from 5 minutes ago, we think that we have a problem, and however it came into our brains feels like what you go and start working on solving. But it's really easy to find the right answer to the wrong question. And you can spend a lot of time and resources working on trying to solve something that's not the actual problem, like making Band-Aids for someone who has a bacterial infection. It's not going to do anything, even though it feels like it's going to be solving the problem, perhaps. At this point, I always like to bring in Einstein, who was reportedly asked if he only had an hour to save the world, how would he spend that hour? And he said he would dedicate 55 minutes to understanding the problem and 5 minutes solving it. We all know Einstein is a pretty smart guy, or was. And so if he was going to give 55 minutes of his hour to understanding the problem, I want to ask, what's your ratio? Think about the last project or problem you worked on in your business. How much of your respective hour did you spend really thinking about the problem before jumping into problem solving mode? Was it even 5 of your 50 minutes? For a lot of people, it's not. And so one way you can really stand out from your competitors is to spend more time trying to understand the problem that exists, why it exists, what's keeping people from taking the actions that you want them to be taking, what the real behavioral issues are. So then you can pull the right levers. And it's easy to plug in the right concept when you know what the true problem is, and you can go through testing some things. I help people go through a process of question storming where we figure out what the problem is as part of my business. We won't get into this much, but it's much better than brainstorming, I'll tell you that. One concept I want to make sure to introduce you to is framing. And you can see there's an episode number there because there's a lot more detail on it. But this is essentially that how you say something matters much more than what you are saying. And my favorite example of this, and we've got another chat box moment coming up here, is if you were to imagine going to a grocery store and you're going to be buying some ground beef, let's say it's spaghetti night tonight, there are 2 stacks that are almost identical. One is labeled as 90% fat-free, and the one next to it labeled 10% fat. Which one do you want to buy? Let's go ahead, throw it in the chat box. What do you think? Which sounds better? And go with that immediate gut reaction. Which one were you more compelled by? We got a fat-free from Stacy. And fat-free, 90% fat-free. Yes. I have given this presentation to many groups around the world, and always, overwhelmingly, everyone says 90% fat-free. It feels better. Logically, we know it's the same thing. It's exactly the same, but your brain doesn't hear or feel it in that way. So if you were to look at your own business and say, there could be something that you're communicating and talking about as 10% fat. And if you just flip the frame and talk about it a little bit differently, find a way to talk about that in the 90% fat-free world, that it could be much more compelling. You don't have to change anything else other than the way that you communicate what's happening. Another kind of level up from that, if you look at your industry that you're in, if there is a way that the entire industry is talking about something as 10% fat, where can you talk about it as 90% fat-free and feel completely different and make it so it's naturally easier for people to choose you, where they feel compelled? There's just something about you that they like. They can't put their finger on it because it's a subconscious thing and they consciously can't explain it, but they like that better. So reframing a message can make astronomical differences in adoption rates. One example I love to give is of a client I worked with, a financial institution who had a new checking account that they were really excited. It was a rewards checking, and they wanted to go out with all their billboards with a message, just wanted to run it by me, get a little bit of insight before they went live. And this is what it was actually going to be on all their campaigns and billboards saying, earn 1.26% APY for up to $25,000 in balances. Yeah, not very compelling, right? Even when you care about the numbers, when you understand that that's a better APY than what you might be getting elsewhere, it doesn't really mean much. It doesn't feel like it's anything worth doing anything with, because our brains are lazy and the subconscious doesn't want to do that sort of calculation. And they were in Southern California. So like driving on the freeway, that's not going to attract much of anybody, to be sure. So I got them to reframe this on all their marketing. We didn't increase the budget or anything that they were planning to spend. And instead of saying this statement, we changed it to say, did your checking account pay you $315 last year? That is much more compelling. And you can very quickly say, no, it didn't. And who's talking about that, right? You want to learn more. You're curious, you're interested because of how that was presented. And for them, they enjoyed a 60% increase in month-over-month account openings when we went live with this campaign, which is not common in financial institution space, to be sure. So a simple reframe of the same stuff can make all the difference. Now, here are a couple of my favorite reframing examples that are super simple for anyone to implement. The first is if versus when. So we feel very compelled all the time to say if. If anyone is interested, please let me know. If you would like to have a conversation, follow up with me. If you have questions, blah, 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 right? That's just a very blasé. There's no reason to follow up with that. If you say when you're ready, here's the information, it keeps that momentum moving forward. It implies something is going to be happening. So just shifting, anytime you think if, ask yourself, how might I say this as a when? When you're ready, here's the link. Instead of, well, if you feel like you're interested, here's some information. That doesn't feel as compelling as when. And people don't really notice that shift. The next is transitioning from anyone to everyone. We're a herding species. And so we like to feel safe and like part of the crowd. So instead of saying, if anyone has questions, I'm here, you can say, for everyone who is interested, here's the next step. Or for everyone who has a question, here you go. When I have guests on my podcast, I don't say, if anyone wants Susie's book, go here. I say, for everyone who's ready, when you want to get it, go to the show notes. So instead of anyone, talk about everyone, and it can make a very big difference in feeling safe. And the last one, which you saw in that example from the financial institution, is to change from a statement to a question. Our brains feel compelled to answer a question. And so if you end your emails, we'll just have the example of, if you have any questions, let me know. Here's all the stuff. If you feel like you're ready to move forward, or even when you feel ready to move forward, let me know, period. There's no real reason that you feel like you have to respond or do something. If instead you were to say, how does that sound? Are you ready to go? What else can I answer for you? What else might you need? How can I be of more help, right? Something that's asking a question or presenting times for a meeting and then saying, which of these works best for you, right? Ending on the question makes people feel very compelled to answer you quicker. So when you're doing anything with selling, or you just want someone to follow up, ending on a question makes a huge, huge difference. So when you know what you want people to do, or how do you know, what you need to know what you want people to do to get them moving. And it's important once you know that, like I said, we're a herding species. So you want to work within the group of saying this, everyone is doing this thing or whatever that is. This is why social proof is so powerful. These are your stars, your reviews, testimonials, things like that. When this was first being researched eons ago, there was a restaurant in China that found when they labeled their most popular dishes on their menu as most popular, so truthfully saying this is most popular, they went up as much as 20% likelihood that those would be chosen. So 13 to 20% increase of people choosing those items when they're labeled as most popular. It may feel silly. Like, we don't need to tell someone that it's the best value. They can calculate that themselves. We don't need to tell them it's the most popular because I don't want to influence their choice. But we need that influence to help us make the best possible decision. And people like to do what others have already done before. So simply adding those two words of most popular, if that could increase the likelihood that people would buy that item from you by 20%, why would you not do that? You're not forcing anyone to, but it helps them to feel more comfortable. One additional concept is of priming. So we talked about framing, that how you say something matters more than what you say. Priming is that something that happens just before you make a decision has a real impact on the choice that is made and what feels most compelling to people. And to kind of show how this works, I'm going to jump into another concept that has some test options. So we're going to go into the chat again, and no Googling because you're supposed to not know this one. All right, so everybody's ready. Are there more or less than 100,000 penguins in Antarctica? Go ahead, claim it in the chat. More or less. Heidi says less. Rakshana says more. We have another more and a less. I see a more. So now everyone, you also now have to claim, how many do you think there are? Give me a number. Come on. Got to state a number. I won't keep going until someone picks, so we pick numbers. Okay, so Joy says 160,000. Kathleen says 40,000. We have a 200,000, 35,000, 180, 250. There are about 12 million penguins in Antarctica. All right. So let's try again. We'll do another one. Are there more or less than 25 million polar bears in the world? Less. Yeah, everyone pretty consistently says less on this one. So how many do you think? How many polar bears are there in the world, left in the world, not just in Antarctica? I think I said that. So in the whole world, we're saying less than 25 million. Give me some numbers. So I saw 500,000, 500,000, 5 million. And we had some others that are getting closer here, which unfortunately say there's only about 26,500 polar bears left in the world. And it could be as little as like 15, as some people had said in there. So what happened? Why were our numbers so off? You may have noticed that I said 100,000 with penguins and you were much lower, and 25 million with polar bears. If I had started with 25 million penguins, would your number have been closer to 12 million than when I primed you with this anchor of 100,000? Likely, yes. And so numbers are a great way to anchor behavior, and our brains just love them and kind of get fixated on that thing that happened just before. One business example before I wrap up here on this is a study that was done with 2 different end cap displays, where they had one that was Snickers bars by them for your freezer. The other said Snickers bars by 18 for your freezer, which we can all agree is a lot of Snickers bars and probably wouldn't feel great about putting out into the world because it's arbitrary and feel weird. And it probably doesn't make that big of a difference, but it actually does. A 38% increase in sales when the number 18 was used instead of the word them. And a big reason for this is because them is like a fancy word for 0 in this case. And like, maybe if it gets past your subconscious filter, you'll get 2, let's say. But with 18, you go, 18, like much better than everybody else. I don't need 18. I'll just get 6, right? Don't even notice how that anchor impacted you. The other thing is there is a slightly different question that's being framed that's behind the signs. So in the case of them, you are saying, you're asking, would you like some Snickers? In the case of 18, you're saying, how many do you want to buy? It has that implied endorsement, this likelihood you're going to buy, like we talked about in the other example. And so being able to have that slight difference makes a huge difference in the way that people choose to buy or not. And I think I have just like 1 minute, so I'm going to do this really quick. So context also matters in the way that we choose. So this is called relativity. And something like this, choosing a restaurant when there's one that's really close by that's 3 stars, one that's further away that is 5 stars, can be really hard to make a choice for people. So I'm going to have you do another guessing game here. When we add this in, which one do you think most people will choose? Real quick. Which stars are we going for? 3, 4, or 5? Do we think people would find most compelling? I think Cindy held up 5. Yep, 5. And you're right, 5 stars in this way. All right, what about this one? Now, which one do we feel most people, what would you feel more compelled to get? What do you think most people will do in this case? 2, 3, or 5 stars? Cindy still says 5. All right, Claire's got it. Chuck's got it. It's 3. So because that one's a little bit worse and a little bit further away, it makes it so that 3-star one feels better to us. Remember, they're all still there. And if you give everyone all 4 options, it's overwhelming in this way. But when you consider the choice where you're kind of trying to nudge them of the best option that you're trying to show, then you can pick which of the others to help make that choice easier for someone presenting that context. So I will go ahead and wrap up now. I'm right on the point here, and just really quick. So these are most of the concepts. I didn't get to really get into nudges that I talked about. And these are episodes of the podcast. Each of these also has a chapter in my book. But if anybody wanted to make notes of what those are, and I know there'll be a recording, so you can go back and grab those later.
You can go ahead and finish nudges if you want.
Okay. All right. So the last piece then would be where we can nudge them along the way as we go. And in business, we really try to get people to go from like step A to double Z. We're thinking way too far and forget all these like steps in the middle. And because the human brain, humans, did you know we all actually make 35,000 decisions every day? On average, 35,000 decisions that you're making. And so in business, when you're communicating with someone, thinking about those micro choice moments, have a lot of nudgeable moments along the way that can keep someone on the path, like bumpers when you go bowling, so they don't get distracted. So if you don't think about enough of the small steps, you would say something like, well, we're going to send out this postcard and then people either buy or they don't. And we do an email and we do this and we do that. And like it works or it doesn't. But really, there are a lot of things that happen along the way. You need someone to notice the postcard, to be interested enough to read it and then flip it over and then not want to throw it away. And then you're asking them to visit your website and maybe read your homepage and click on a product page and then go to the pricing page and place something in their cart and then hit buy. There's a lot of stuff that you're asking them to do and not get distracted by Netflix or Instagram or a conversation with someone or the kids they have at home or whatever it is. So if you make sure that along the way, you can be incorporating those behavioral nudges to make it so they're more likely to keep going down the path, that is a better way to success that you can be nudging. And one of my favorite examples of this is of opportunistic insurance fraud in the UK, which was £1 billion a year problem for the industry. This is like, if you know you're going to be the one driving, but you list your your 16-year-old son is going to be the one driving the car, but you list yourself as the primary driver, so you don't have to pay quite as much in insurance. And that's probably a decision you make right in the moment. And it feels like, how could you even get people to change their minds here to do anything differently? And so a test was done with 18 different interventions. One of them included priming in the CAPTCHA. So we've all had to prove we're not a robot a lot of times. And you probably wouldn't even have it be a blip on the radar if the word here you had to type was honesty, which is what happened here. And that reduced that opportunistic fraud by as much as half, which, if we remember this being a billion-pound problem, saving 500 million pounds by just priming with that honesty right before the nudgeable moment. So that word or imagery and things can really make a difference in the choices we make. And so it's important to test, because they did 18 different things, and some were like, 8% effective, which is still a great lift. But if they hadn't tested more and looked at these other options, they potentially would have missed out on, hundreds of millions that could have been saved by what was the most successful. So when you do experiments yourself, keep them small, so you don't have to try to do huge things. You can change the color of a button, the way you end your email, a subject line, whatever. Be thoughtful about what it is that you're doing, so you don't try to change everything, because it would take way too much, but just the right things, and that you're working on the right problems to solve. And then make sure you test often, just like baking those cakes. There's lots of opportunity to learn and to grow. So I will stop there. Thank you for letting me take a little bit longer. And then there's a little tidbit of my book. Oh, and yeah, we have the freebie that I guess Cindy will bring up. I'll stop sharing. Whew, there we go. Oh, you're muted, Cindy.
Cindy, you're muted. Oh, sorry.
Yep. So I'm going to be giving the first chapter of the book for free, which Cindy put in there. So anybody who wants, if you're thinking, is this for me? Should I check it out? You can go to thebrainybusiness.com/ECN and get the first chapter of my book free. And you can, read it, see how that goes for you. And then there are links to get it. I also have a 111-page PDF companion workbook that I made, just full of worksheets for everybody, that's free as well to be able to access, because it's important to me for people to be able to apply and do this stuff. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I've got it here. So to gain access to the first chapter of her book, go to thebrainybusiness.com again, ECN, and then also go to Amazon and get her book. And I'm going through it myself. I love it. It's just really making clear a lot of the concepts that she talked about. And then you can support anything that she mentions here in the podcast. So lots of great content and information. And she is 5 stars on Amazon. So that is, exciting. And congratulations on that, Melina. Also, if you go to thebrainybusiness.com, you'll have access to her latest podcast, as I mentioned earlier. And then how can people from thebrainybusiness.com alone, they can go to your podcast, right?
Yep. Yeah. So there's a podcast page there, and, links for that, as well as more information about the book and links for all the socials. You can find me as The Brainy Biz pretty much anywhere. So.
Perfect. Okay. So just wrap a bow around all this. Forget brainstorming, try question storming. I love that. That's wonderful. Okay. So we're going to go to the breakout rooms next. And so the question of the hour is kind of a variation on our informal networking questions. How might behavioral economics help your business to stand out? So we're going to go ahead and do 2 breakout rooms. And so I'm just going to go ahead and stop the share and get us into the room. So I'll have Chuck and Kathleen take the lead in the breakout rooms.